Dear students, this channel is for practicing PTA modules every day. If you are struggling with PTA reading module, you can purchase a reading course, which may help you to ace your reading score. Contact us on 6367949840, 9588068207.
When I enrolled in my master's course at Oxford last year, I had come straight from medical school with the decision to leave clinical science for good. Thinking back, I realized that I didn't put very much weight on this decision at the time. But today, I more clearly understand the consequences of leaving my original profession. When I meet old friends who are now physicians and surgeons, I sense how our views on medical problems have diverged. They scrutinize the effects of disease and try to eliminate or alleviate them. I try to understand how they come about in the first place. I feel happier working on this side of the problem, although I do occasionally miss clinical work and seeing patients. Since the late 1980s, there has been a move towards greater private contributions, particularly student fees. In 1989, the Australian government introduced the Higher Education Contribution Scheme, HECS, which included a loan scheme to help students finance their contributions. This enabled universities to remain accessible to students by delaying their payments until they could afford to pay off their loans. In 2002, the Australian government introduced a scheme similar to HECS for postgraduate students, the Postgraduate Education Loan Scheme, PELS. Ikebana is the Japanese art of flower arrangement. It is more than simply putting flowers in a container. It is a disciplined art form in which the arrangement is a living thing where nature and humanity are brought together. Contrary to the idea of a parti-colored or multicolored arrangement of blossoms, Ikebana often emphasizes other areas of the plant. It is steeped in the philosophy of developing a closeness with nature, such as its stems and leaves, and puts emphasis on shape, line, and form. Though Ikebana is an expression of creativity, certain rules govern its form. The artist's intention behind each is shown through a piece's color combinations, natural shapes, graceful lines, and the implied meaning of the arrangement. In his fascinating book Carbon Detox, George Marshall argues that people are not persuaded by information. Our views are formed by the views of the people with whom we mix. Of the narratives that might penetrate these circles, we are more likely to listen to those which offer us some reward. A story which tells us that the world is cooking and that we'll have to make sacrifices for the sake of future generations is less likely to be accepted than the more rewarding idea that climate change is a conspiracy hatched by scheming governments and venal scientists, and that strong, independent-minded people should unite to defend their freedoms. In a sequence of bestsellers, including The Language Instinct and How the Mind Works, Pinker has argued that sways of our mental, social and emotional lives may have originated as evolutionary adaptations, well suited to the lives our ancestors eked out on the Pleistocene savanna. Sometimes it seems as if nothing is immune from being explained this way. Road rage, adultery, marriage, altruism, our tendency to reward senior executives with corner offices on the top floor, and the small number of women who become mechanical engineers, all may have their roots in natural selection, Pinker claims. The controversial implications are obvious that men and women might differ in their inborn abilities at performing certain tasks, for example, or that parenting may have little influence on personality. Learning to write well means discovering how to write plainly and clearly. Now that doesn't mean that plainness is the only good style, or that you should become a slave to spare, unadorned writing. Formality and ornateness have their place, and in competent hands complexity can carry us on a dizzying, breathtaking journey. But most students, most of the time, should strive to be sensibly simple, to develop a baseline style of short words, active verbs, and relatively simple sentences conveying clear actions or identities. It's faster, it makes arguments easier to follow, it increases the chances a busy reader will bother to pay attention, and it lets you center one more attention on your moments of rhetorical flourish, which I do not advise abandoning altogether. The article subjects the assumptions and prescriptions of the corporate culture literature to critical scrutiny. The body of the article is devoted to teasing out the distinctive basis of its appeal compared with earlier management theory. It is seen to build upon earlier efforts, e.g. Theory Y, to constitute a self-disciplining form of employee subjectivity by asserting that practical autonomy is conditional upon the development of a strong corporate culture. The paper illuminates the dark side of this project by drawing attention to the subjugating and totalitarian implications of its excellence/quality prescriptions. To this end, parallels are drawn with the philosophy of control favored by the party in Orwell's 1984. Specifically, the paper critiques the doublethink contention that autonomy can be realized in monocultural conditions that systematically constrain opportunities to wrestle with competing values, standpoints, and their associated life projects. Private schools in the UK are redoubling their marketing efforts to foreigners. Almost a third of the 68,000 boarding pupils at such schools already come from overseas. But now, with many UK residents unwilling or unable to afford the fees, top boarding schools are edging towards £30,000, $49,759 a year, and a cultural shift away from boarding. Many schools are looking abroad to survive. Sue Fieldman, press officer at the Good Schools Guide, says, "It's a whole new world out there. 10 years ago, English private schools were full of English pupils. Now you see foreigners in most schools. With the recession, there are gaps in desks and beds. If they can't fill them with English, they fill them with foreigners, especially Russians and Chinese. Overseas students now account for about £500 of fee income a year for boarding schools in the UK.